Right, let's get into the usual, the news and views from around the world and some comments on it. And the first thing we're going to is the US Embassy in Haiti. As per usual, we have clowns ringing up. Haiti, the US Embassy in Haiti warned Americans on Saturday to shelter in place due to ongoing protests in the capital. Now, several airlines also cancelled flights in and out of Port-au-Prince, and the Haitian government on Saturday suspended a fuel price hike. Yeah, thanks Rothschilds. After violence in Port-au-Prince and the northern city of Cap Haitien. Prime Minister Jacques Guy Lafontaine had originally said the country needed to raise prices to balance the budget and gave no indication he would back down. It's nothing to do with the budget and everything to do with looting. But his administration bowed to pressure after demonstrators took to the streets in protest. And the journalist from the Associated Press reported seeing several hundred people on Saturday attack a Best Western Premier Hotel, one of the capital's wealthiest neighbourhoods, and guests were forced to remain inside as rocks were hurled through windows at around 10 a.m. local time. I must say, you can't blame them. The crimes that has gone on in Haiti has yet to be fully revealed. And yes, it involves the Clinton Foundation, yet again, and the named charities Red Cross, Oxfam, and that lady who recently allegedly committed suicide was also part of the Haitian team of destruction for that country. So the rioters shattered the main entrance and then proceeded to move on to other high-priced hotels. Thankfully, no injuries or deaths were reported during the day's incidents, but at least 3 people were killed Friday as protesters used burning tyres and barricades to block major streets. Unfortunately, they got a bit out of control and they attempted to set a gas station on fire but were held off by the police. Now, the reason being for this is after the Commerce Ministry and Economic Ministry issued a joint statement announcing a price increase of between 38 and 51% for gasoline, diesel and kerosene. So if they haven't done enough damage to that country with the fake earthquakes, which wasn't an earthquake at all. Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed arrived in neighbouring Eritrea on Sunday, where he met with the nation's president Isaias Afwerki, and the meeting was hailed as a brotherly embrace by Eritrea's information minister. The two Horn of Africa states has had no diplomatic relations since a bloody border war in the late 90s, which claimed at least 80,000 people's lives. And Eritrea was part of Ethiopia until it won independence in 1991 after a 30-year armed struggle. So that, like Trump and the North Korea, and North Korea and South Korea finally meeting, we are seeing countries now joining back up together. This is a sign of the change, and it is being brought about largely by the people. The first thing on Haiti, the people have decided they're going to protest of what's going on in their country, and they managed to block the raising of prices, and that's where it all comes down to. You're waiting for government to fix anything. We'll wait forever. They've never done anything, maybe even not allowed to do anything. You could go that far. Pope Francis, we'll have more about him. He's decided to open his big mouth. Said there's a danger that Christians will disappear from the Middle East, he has warned, blaming murderous indifference. That's a laugh coming from the Catholic Church. Really. To violence that has forced tens of thousands of Christians to flee their homes. And speaking to leaders of Middle East churches in the Italian city of Bari on Saturday, the pontiff said there is a danger that the presence of our brothers and sisters in the faith will disappear, which will disfigure the very face of the region. Really. He added that A Middle East without Christians would not be the Middle East, and described the Middle East as being covered by dark clouds of war, violence and destruction. I agree on that. Instances of occupation, which is never ever addressed, and varieties of fundamentalism, forced migration and neglect. I agree with all of that. But where have they been? Where have the church been in their role in it? Because they do have a role in the Middle East that causes a lot of this violence. He said all of this has taken place amid the complicit silence of many, not no more. And he went on to address the indifference exhibited by regional powers who have sought power and profit at the expense of people in the region. Hello, Israel. Indifference kills, and we desire to lift up our voices in opposition to this murderous indifference. And he denounced the weapons trade that fuels wars in the region and appealed to global powers to end their thirst for profit that exploits oil and gas fields without regard for our common home, with no scruples about the fact that the energy market now dictates the law of coexistence amongst peoples. All very valid, I have to say. You should never neglect their role in causing issues in the Middle East, given they set up most of the religions, if not all of them. Nice story from India. A train passenger has been hailed a hero after saving 26 girls from suspected child traffickers. Mr. Shriv Astava raised the alarm by tweeting authorities after spotting the girls on a train in the Uttar Pradesh region of northern India. And he noticed the 26 girls who he thought looked distressed travelling in the same carriage as him on Thursday, and concerned that something untoward was underway, he notified rail authorities, the Minister for Railways and even the Prime Minister. And all those girls were all rescued. Good stuff, you see. People power again. We have to speak up. We all have a voice, not just me or other radio show hosts. Everyone has a voice. And far too many have chosen to ignore things that don't look right. You know, that guy did, and just saved probably 26 girls from being chopped. Here's an interesting twist. You can read a lot more into this, but a US congressman has introduced a bill that could send anti-fascist activists to prison for up to 15 years for protesting in masks. The bill, introduced by Republican Representative Dan Donovan, imposes penalties on anyone who injures, oppresses, threatens or intimidates another person while wearing a mask or a disguise. Now, while the text of the bill itself doesn't mention anti-fascist activists, the name is more explicit: the Unmasking Antifa Act of 2018. So, where will the management company of Mr. Soros go to next? It looks like they're going to get shut down. Recognise who the problem is, and they're taking steps, which you have to applaud. One hopes it doesn't lead into anything else, but on the face of it, unmasking people who like to exhibit violence on others for having a different opinion is a good thing, in my opinion. Where are we? This is off to London now, and the head of the Metropolitan Police has said she is completely comfortable, wait for it, with the ongoing trials of facial recognition technology in the city. Like they haven't already got it, you know. Despite legal challenges and reports that it fails most of the time, Police Commissioner Cressida Dick, it's an unfortunate name, made the comments on Wednesday at a London Assembly meeting aimed at addressing concerns about the trial and rollout of automated facial recognition. So far this year, the technology has been used 4 times, and plans are in place to use the technology a further 5 times by the year's end. And a defence of the system comes just 1 month after a Freedom of Information request by civil liberties campaigners Big Brother Watch discovered that the Met's system had a 98% false positive rate and has only made 2 accurate matches. That's what they like to tell you. Also in London, Theresa May has launched a reshuffle of her top team after a string of resignations. No surprise, she'll be next. Over her Brexit strategy and plunged her government into crisis, as if it wasn't already. You know, when you've got Boris Johnson in your government, I would call that crisis, but maybe not. Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has been named as the new Foreign Secretary after Boris Johnson quit. Good. And accusing Mrs May of pursuing a semi-Brexit. Go figure. Again, we called this in our show on the night of the vote. If you remember correctly, I think we were in CB then. I said they wouldn't, they'd just stall and stall and stall and then offer another vote, and the whole voting system will change. We'll see. Maybe all countries can exit the EU and NATO. Maybe that's why Trump was there. We'll find out sooner or later. And Boris Johnson's departure followed that of the Brexit Secretary David Davis and also several junior figures. And I don't think that's the end of the those quitting in the UK. 2 respective polls that have come out this week, and it's suggested that just 47% of Americans said they are extremely proud of their citizenship, which, according to this new poll, it's the first time that number has dipped below 50% in the 18 years Gallup has been asking the question. Now, back in 2003, 70% of respondents said they were extremely proud to be American, marking the poll's record high, and since then it started dropping. And by last year that number had dropped to 51% and it's now 47%. And a large majority of citizens still say they are somewhat proud to be American, and 25% considered themselves very proud, and 16% moderately proud. Only about 1 in 10 say they are just a little bit proud or not proud at all. Now, the Democrats' pride in their country has slipped drastically since 2013. No surprise there. From a majority of 56% down to 32% now are proud to be American. And about half of independents said they were extremely proud in 2013, and now it's 42%. Republicans, meanwhile, are the proudest they have been of their American citizenship in 5 years, with a whopping 74% saying they're extremely proud to be an American, and at least one day we'll know we'll be free. Russia next, and 2/3, 66%, of Russians believe in the existence of a shadowy world government. Big change. And most of them also believe it is hostile to their country. On Wednesday, state-run Russian public opinion research agency released the results of a poll in which 67% of Russian citizens said they believed there was a secret world government, a new world order. 21% said they reject the possibility that it exists. Only 1 in 5, and the rest were undecided. Now, just 2 years ago, about 45% said they believed in the existence of a global government, so that's up 22%, while over 30% rejected the idea, so that's gone down a lot as well. The survey also revealed that the percentage of those who believe it exists is higher among older people, over 70% of them, but among people between 18 and 34, it was also significant, about 55%. So obviously the Russians are teaching their youth about, New World Order. A few people I've spoken to who have been to Russia, apart from being completely surprised at how the Western world portrays life there, is what they put on their TV channels. There's ET disclosure regularly, high-end stuff as well, including release of documents, while we're all waiting for so-called disclosure, which we've already had. But so they tell their people about what's really going on, which is contrary to what we're being told by the Western media, which is all lies. More people power. Back to India again. A citizen-led movement in India's capital Delhi has successfully halted the cutting down of more than 16,000 trees in the city. And the BBC spoke to some of these people actively involved in the movement, and Yuha Saklani recounts how horrified she felt when she first heard about a government proposal to cut down thousands of trees in the heart of Delhi to build houses for government employees. They certainly won't build houses for the populace in India. The poverty there is shocking. And she said, some of us who love trees and feel strongly about the connection of trees with pollution felt that this was a criminally wrong plan, adding that this was what forced her to become a citizen activist. Now, Delhi is one of the world's most polluted cities, with air quality frequently reaching hazardous levels. And the one mitigating factor is that large parts of the city have still substantial green cover, although this has been depleting due to development projects. So, like I said, yet again, it's an example of people power saying, we're not happy with that and we don't want it, go away. TSA next. Total sexual assholes. Appears that officers of the TSA are immune from abuse lawsuits because they are not investigators or law enforcement officials. Really. And this was a ruling according to a federal court of appeals which dismissed a Florida woman's lawsuit. Now, the Federal Tort Claims Act shields most US government employees from intentional tort claims, with the exception of law enforcement or investigators. However, TSA personnel do not fall into this category, and the Third US Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Wednesday in a 2-1 verdict. TSA employees typically are not law enforcement officers. They certainly act like it. Talk about give somebody a badge and it goes to the head. They're the prime example. And do not act as such, according to the Circuit Court, but rather carry out administrative searches and contact local law enforcement if they encounter situations requiring action beyond their limited, though important, responsibilities. Really. Yet again, no accountability. Yet again, it's up to the people to enforce accountability on these people. You know, interfering with kids and everything. A delegation in South Africa, we're certainly skipping around the world now, but a delegation of 30 South African farming families has arrived in Russia's Farm Belt, Stavropol region, and the group says it's facing violent attacks and death threats back in South Africa. We covered this story recently. They're basically throwing the white farmers out and killing a load of people. It's not a smart move, that. But up to 15,000 Boers, who are descendants of the Dutch settlers in South Africa, are planning to move to Russia amid rising violence stemming from government plans to expropriate their land. And the spokesperson said it's become a matter of life and death. There are attacks on us, and it's got to the point where the politicians are stirring up a wave of violence. I wonder who's pulling the strings of all that. And that he said the climate here in Stavropol is temperate, and this land is created by God for farming, and this is all very attractive to the Boers descendants. So migration out of South Africa into Russia. What will happen there, unless those people learn some common sense, is will be a repeat of what happened in Zimbabwe in the 90s. They did exactly the same, and the black people didn't just reclaim the land, they slaughtered. Many white farmers set fire to all the equipment and set fire to all the fields. 12 months later they were all starving, and it was a famine. And unless they get proper leaders, people, maybe activists, and get together, you're going to see the same thing in South Africa. The blacks need the whites, and the whites need the blacks as well. You know, let's start working together. PayPal always comes to collect your debts, except a British man discovered it in quite a grievous manner this month, after the US company threatened action against his wife, who had recently died of cancer, for being in breach of contract for being deceased. I'll repeat that again. Threatened action against his wife, who had recently died of cancer, for being in breach of contract for being deceased. Unbelievable. And the death of the 37-year-old British woman Lindsay Durdle, who passed away from breast cancer, apparently violates PayPal's account holder policies. You're not allowed to die. Wish the Rothschilds had that policy. We'll find out more why I said that later. After being notified by her surviving husband Howard of her tragic end on May 31st, the American company demanded, in a quite peculiar way, a repayment of about $3,200 that apparently she owed. And in the letter it says, "You are in breach of condition 15.4c of your agreement with PayPal Credit, as we have received notice that you are deceased." And this was all after Mr. Durdle had provided them with copies of her death certificate, her will and ID. Unbelievable. Breach of contract for dying. Twitter. Of course, they're starting to panic. Maybe some took up my idea of bombarding people's Twitter accounts and shutting these treasonous traitors in our midst down. But so their response is they will begin removing tens of millions of suspicious accounts from users' followers starting today, signaling a major new effort to restore trust, really, on the popular but embattled platform. And the reform takes aim at the pervasive form of social media fraud. Many users have inflated their followers on Twitter or other services with automated or fake accounts, buying the appearance of social influence to bolster their political activism, business endeavours or entertainment careers. Really. I guarantee it'll be the political activists that are shut down. Some of them already have. Tehran has announced that purchase orders by merchants that are based on US currency would no longer be allowed to go through import procedures, so they're dumping the dollar. And the policy is in line with an official request by the Central Bank of Iran, and specifically meant to address fluctuations in market rates of the US dollar. And the CBI's Director of Foreign Exchange Rules and Policies Affairs, Mr. Kazray Poor, was quoted as saying the move has become effective from Wednesday by virtue of a letter sent to the Ministry of Industry, Mines and Trade. So Tehran is no longer using US currency. Now, what is expected to happen soon is China is expected to follow Iran. and they are also trying to encourage Russia to follow suit. It could get rather ugly in the currency exchanges and the markets. Here's another. As one of the world's top energy importers, China has successfully completed its fifth dry run in yuan-backed oil future contract trading. So they're dumping it as well. And the step has already been called Beijing's challenge to the US dollar. And according to Bloomberg this week, which cited a statement from the exchange, 149 members of Shanghai International Energy Exchange traded 648,000 lots in the rehearsal with a total value of 268 billion yuan. Now, the system met the listing requirements of crude futures after the exercise, and it added this contract has the potential to greatly help China's push for yuan internationalization. And the chief China economist said in Paris, however, its success will hinge critically on the degree of freedom allowed for the capital flows related to the contract. So it looks like the petrodollar is going to bite the dust as well. A woman this week was found dead in a trash compactor at a New York apartment block on Tuesday evening. The 48-year-old, who police said lived at the premises, was found unconscious inside the machine and was pronounced dead at the scene. Police have been called to the block at 1 Irving Place in Union Square, where Anthony Weiner and Huma Abedin own an apartment. Coincidence? Think not. She was found by a building maintenance worker, and her identity is being withheld until police notify her family. A spokesman for the NYPD told the press that the woman's cause of death will be announced by the medical examiner. So this is another one of the Clinton body counts, no doubt about it. And NYPD have an opportunity to end that. Not only an opportunity, but in my opinion, after 2 years, you have an obligation. There's barely a week that goes by now where someone has been killed, committed suicide, which is another version of being murdered, or heart attacked, which they have weapons to induce. And amazingly, they're all linked to Clinton. And yet you sit with that video. Enough's enough. There's far too many people who have died at the hands of the Clintons, while you sit on evidence that would have them hung within the year. Time to step up. The good news this week is Trump has pardoned Dwight Hammond Jr. and Stephen Hammond. Of course, this was rather prevalent a couple of years back when the occupation, 41-day occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge 2 years ago. I thought it was longer than that. I thought it was 3 or 4. And the occupation that led to the death of Robert Lavoie Finicum, or actual not death, murder. The rancher who acted as the protesters' spokesman. Of course, Mr. Finicum was murdered by a state trooper, or so they say. And if you look at the film, you'll see it wasn't a state trooper, it was a sniper. During an encounter between the armed occupation group and law enforcement led to charges against an FBI special agent. Now, President Trump just signed the order granting clemency to Dwight and his son Stephen, who were convicted of arson in 2012 for fires that burned on federal land in 2001 and 2006. Though they served their original sentences for the conviction, Dwight served 3 months and Stephen served 1 year. An appellate judge ruled in 2015 that the terms were too short under federal minimum sentencing laws, and the Hammonds were resentenced to serve a mandatory minimum. Now, the conviction of the Hammonds was which did draw significant rebuke from the local community, and there have been accusations that the family was aggressively prosecuted using anti-terrorism statutes because they were outspoken about public land use in rural Oregon. That was a nice pardon and a triumph for the alt media again. We've drove all this, all these disclosures has come through us, and you should never underestimate people power. Look what happened in India. 16,000 trees being cut down, stopped. Look again what happened in India. Someone being observant and recognised that those girls were in trouble and saved 26 girls from child traffickers. You know, we can't all stay quiet any longer. And a concerted push now will tip them over the edge.